Hello, I'm Julian Greystoke. Welcome back to my couch where I review books and ask a very important question. Are heterosexuals okay? Alright, mostly that's a joke, but I just read a romance book and I'm a little worried. The book that I just read was Well Met, a romance story primarily set in a Renaissance festival, so that sounded fun. Keep in mind going into this that I am not usually a romance reader, so that can tell you how seriously or not seriously you want to take my thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and read the synopsis off of my laptop, which is over here. That's what I'm looking at, alright? All's fair in love and war for two sworn enemies, sure, who indulge in harmless flirtation in a laugh-out-loud rom-com debut. Laugh out loud. I never once even came close to laughing, let alone out loud, but let's keep going. Emily knew there would be strings attached when she relocated to the small town of Willow Creek, Maryland, for the summer to help her sister recover from an accident. But who could anticipate getting roped into volunteering for the local Renaissance fair alongside her teenage niece? Or that the irritating and inscrutable school teacher in charge of the volunteers would be so annoying that she finds it impossible to stop thinking about him. The fair is Simon's family legacy, and from the start he makes it clear he doesn't have time for Emily's lighthearted approach to life, her oddball Shakespeare conspiracy theories, or her endless suggestions for new acts to shake things up. Those things are barely present. Like, this makes this book sound a lot more dynamic than it was. Yet on the fair grounds he becomes a different person, flirting freely with Emily when she's in her revealing wench's costume. But is this attraction real, or is it just part of the characters they're portraying? Summer was only ever supposed to be a pit stop on the way to somewhere else for Emily, but soon she can't seem to shake the fantasy of establishing something more with Simon, or a permanent home of her own in Willow Creek. So that synopsis made this book sound a lot more interesting than it turned out to be. I have a shit ton of notes, like way more notes than I probably should have for a fairly harmless little romance book, but let's just dive right into it. The first thing I noticed is that this book took way too long to get to the fair part. Like, I thought we were gonna dive right into her being part of the Renaissance fair, but no, we have to get her not only involved in it, but we have to go through several practices and picking names and trying on costumes multiple times and blah 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 blah. And for people who are not very familiar with how Renaissance festivals run, this is probably good, helpful information, but I am pretty familiar with it. I've helped out in Renaissance festivals before, not to mention having an extensive live theater background and having an extensive background with running large LARP events. So everything that was being told to me at this beginning part was like such a drag to read, because I was like, yes, I know we have to pick names. Oh my gosh. Now we're learning about being in character and silly accents, and just make it stop. So it was either me being annoyed that I was getting nothing but information that I already knew, or me baffled at the logistics of how this supposedly small town where everybody knows everybody runs a Renaissance festival successful enough to afford a mounted joust. The fact that our main character is a semi-unwilling newbie was also pretty frustrating for me. I knew she was going to end up doing it, so I was just like, why are you dragging your feet so much? Can't you just be into this? While the main character will stand up for herself, she was kind of a blandy pants for me. I really couldn't tell you really any characteristics that she had, except for occasionally she would snipe back when somebody was mean to her. She's also like incredibly loyal to her sister, and in that way she is sort of the stereotypical good main character. She is just good. And when your main description for your main character is she is good, I'm just not really feeling them. This small town was also very romanticized. I have not done the research to find out if this is a real small town with real locations, but one of the characters that our main character meets owns a book and coffee shop, and she admits that yes, it is kind of hard to run a business like this in a small town, especially with like Amazon and Barnes & Noble existing in the world. But then she's like, but it's a small town, so everybody wants to help support me, and so they come buy books from me instead. And I'm like, whoa, shit. I mean, maybe in your small town, but I grew up in exactly the kind of town you're describing, and my small town is where businesses go to die. Starting a small business in either of the towns that I have lived in is a real uphill fight. And the people in that town are not just going to, like, help you ever at all. Oh, we've already come to my note where I ask, are the heteros okay? And that's because of the love interest. Now, the thing to talk about in the synopsis is that he flirts with her when he's in character, when they're both in character at the fair. And the rest of the times, he's a grade A grumpy pants. And that's true, and it would be a little bit more convincing if either of them had a very strong character outside of flashy outfits and bad accents. Like, I never got a feel for what their characters actually were supposed to be. And let me tell you, as someone who loves coming up with a character to portray, that was also really disappointing. It was impossible for me to tell, other than his silly accent, when Simon was going to be a grumpy pants and when he was going to flirt with her, because I just didn't have a handle on his character, and she really didn't ever come up with her own character. Yes, she had a name and a silly accent, but she had like no backstory or anything like that, and nobody really encouraged her to make one. So ultimately, that whole they flirt when they're in character, they fight when they're not thing was a real dud for me. It would have been better if they had stronger characters to play. And I totally understand how that falling in love while in character thing can work. I've been on stage a lot in my life, and two actors playing romantically across from each other can sometimes develop real-life romantic feelings. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it totally can. But again, that often stems from the characters that they are playing having romantic feelings for each other, and I just wasn't feeling it in this book. But the reason I wanted to ask, are the heteros okay, is the way that Simon treats her when he's not in character is like so bad, and like for no real clear reason that we ever get. He never apologizes for it either. He's just a dick to her, and then they fall in love and he's not a dick anymore. I am not here for the whole assholery is flirting. Now, I see what the author was going for, and I do feel a little bit better about the romance story that I'm writing as a result. A lot of people really like sort of hate to love romance stories, and I think that's what this author was going for. But it's a fine line that you have to walk. And while I was worried that my sort of similarly difficult love interest in the book that I am writing was too unlikable, he's got nothing on Simon, and apparently a lot of people like this book, so maybe I'm gonna be fine. But seriously, heterosexuals, are you okay? The romantic interest constantly being a total ass, then snogging the MC, and she seems fine with it, is just like a big part of the story, and I just... Why? Why is she fine? She's like, ugh, he's such a dick to me. Oh, never mind, he's kissing me and that's hot. Heterosexuals, are you okay? This was a very predictable story. I don't read a lot of romance, but I could catch every single beat that was going to happen, to the point where I was like, alright, let's get to the next beat now. Oh, there it is. This book is all misunderstandings all the time, so if that's a trope that you like, you will probably like this book. It relies so much on people just not communicating with each other, but I know some people do like that trope, so enjoy. Here's what I wrote. I have no patience for romantic interests who get forgiven for bad behavior because they're sad. Nah, fam, you gotta apologize and amend your behavior. He basically is like, well, I know I was a dick to you, but my brother's dead, and I'm a sad boy, so let's have sex. So one of the things that I had a big problem with in this book comes down to the names for costume pieces. Our main character has that delightful moment where she gets laced into her bodice, and it is super tight, and she almost passes out on numerous occasions. Now, it is specifically described as a bodice, and she is even corrected for calling it a corset at some point in the story. But the way it's described definitely reads much more corset to me. A bodice is often worn over the clothing, which hers is, but it's not meant to shape the woman. It's not really meant to, in my experience with bodices versus corsets on the stage, the bodice doesn't push up the boobs and make the waist smaller. like this bodice was described to do. So really, this is more like a over-the-clothing corset, but it's never described as such. I've never heard of anybody almost passing out from wearing a bodice, but I have from wearing a corset. So is she wearing a corset or a bodice? If you are more familiar with bodices, as I am more familiar with corsets myself, I usually wear corsets if I'm going to wear one or the other. If you're more familiar with bodices, please let me know if they can get as tight as corsets and you can have those nearly passing out moments. Like, I need to know. At one point, when the romantic interest inevitably gets to loving our main character, he decides to woo her. And I can see how a lot of people would find that very sweet and swoon-worthy, but it would have made me alarmed. I'm not really one for big romantic gestures, and I would have been, really over his by the time that he was making public declarations of his feelings for me when we barely stopped arguing like a day ago. This book doesn't really have any other plot besides will they or won't they get together, and I was hoping there would be a bit more of one. They touch on a few things here and there to do with the fair, but honestly I was hoping there would be something more going on with the fair that would give us some sort of external plot from the will they won't they thing. You also have the main character and her sister, but that's kind of tangential and you know that's going to work out anyway, and they never really have any big conflicts with that either. This is a very conflict-light book. Everybody gets along with our main character except the guy who she's supposed to date. I will say that if you're the kind of person who likes to read romance but not smut, this might be a book that's up your street. There are a couple of sex scenes, but they're very understated, very vanilla, and I handle them easily as someone who doesn't like sex scenes in their books. I just wrote, if the main character made fewer assumptions and asked more questions, this book would be so much shorter. Yeah, this book would be like 10 pages long if she just asked a few questions every now and then. Now, you guys know that in the traditional cycle of a romance story, there's often a breakup moment. If the characters get together before the book ends, there has to be a big breakup moment so they can come back together. But again, I'm just gonna read what I wrote. After only 2 sexual encounters and no dates to speak of, the main character is still absolutely devastated when they have their breakup moment. She is crushed, breaking up with this man who she slept with twice and never really had any dates with. This man who, for most of the time that she has known him, basically verbally berated her at every opportunity, but she is rattled to her core at their breakup. Honestly, and I'll be real, the 2 romantic interests in this book just don't have any chemistry for me, and I had a really hard time shipping them. Again, this book is popular, so clearly these characters had chemistry for other people, but I just did not see it. Speaking of there not being a plot, there is this through line where the main character wants to have Shakespeare as a character within the Renaissance Festival, and her romantic interest, Simon, every time she mentions that, shoots her down hard, like really hard. And I was like, why? Why is he doing that? What sort of history does he have with the person who maybe used to play Shakespeare here? Never addressed. Never addressed. Why does he hate Shakespeare and not want him in his Renaissance fair? We still have no idea. And if you like endings that are pure, unadulterated mush, sweet enough to rot your teeth out of your head, this is the story for you. If you are looking for something so fluffy it could float away on a breeze, very inoffensive, if a little bit frustrating and not very deep, then this book might be right up your street. Especially if you like verbally abusive hate to romance stories. But I was really disappointed in this one. I do like a fluffy romance from time to time, especially if I'm like in a bad mood or in a reading slump. Sometimes just a fluffy little romance will get me out of it, but not this. This book was a real letdown. I thought that maybe the Renaissance Festival thing would be enough to get me through, but basically I was hate reading so I could do a review of it by the end. And by the end, where it was all just mush and fluff and sweetness, I just stopped paying attention. I'm sorry if you absolutely loved this book. Like I said, lots of people do. I just don't know why. Apparently I am a cold, heartless bitch because I did not enjoy this at all. Leave a comment below though if you have read this and tell me what you actually liked about it. Were some of the things that I hated some of the very things that you loved? Let me know. Just try to keep it civil. Alright guys, that's the end of this review. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least enjoyed hate watching it. If you want more book reviews, there are a ton of them here on my channel, so go check them out. They're all in a playlist for easy binging. And if you want brand new content, I post new videos Mondays and Fridays. Plus, you can hop on over to my Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive content not seen here on the regular channel, including a lot of it to do with my pets. So, that's cool, right? Aw, Jeannie's purring. Alright guys, I'm out of here. Kinshu and I will see you again next time for whatever it is we happen to be doing next time. Bye! Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. But before you go, I have some really important people I need to tell you about. Those people are Ray, Artemis, Shelby, Zaire, Adrienne, Jesper, Ryakio, Irene, Sabby Panda, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, and Lisa. Why are they so important? Well, they are my patrons, the most important people here on this channel, and you can be one too. Shout out for the patrons. If there's a prize for rotten judgment, I guess I've already won that. No man is worth the aggravation. That's ancient history, been there, done that.